Time for our first fireside chat of the show now with Aaron Kalvani, Global AI Transformation Leader at the United Nations. We're talking scaling ethical AI for global good. Hi Aaron, how are you?
Hello Neil, can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, which is always very reassuring during a virtual event, or we'd have to do the whole thing through mime and expressive dance, which I just don't think is what the people are here for. Anyway, you've already bought into it. This is going to be fine. Right, let's start at the beginning because there's some very specific questions I want to go into with you. But first of all, I'd love to know, more about your role, what it involves, how it fits in, because it might not be the sort of thing that people automatically put together. So for you, what does the role involve? What's the remit? Talk me through it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's exciting. I have to say, it's an exciting role. It gets me around the world, which is one of the things I like to do. Not the most. I wouldn't call them holidays where I go, unfortunately. But what I do and what my remit is really focusing on AI for good. And lots of people ask me what that means, and I say, well, it's not AI for bad, right? Which is effectively we're trying to improve the pillars of the United Nations and get a little bit more support by partnering on them. So the role really is, from a technical point of view, understanding the technology and where it's going, and from socializing and understanding and building partnerships, it's really about, understanding what other people do and how we can help each other. So that's it in a nutshell, Neil.
Okay, well, let's break it down into particular areas. First of all, how AI is being used to predict and respond to natural disasters, and ethically, how is it used in that field?
Well, that's a very pertinent question, Neil. I've just come back from visiting 12 countries around the world discussing just that. Now, the United Nations partners with a range of organizations to leverage AI in predicting and responding to natural disasters. Now, think about it. For example, the UN Environmental Programme, that's the UNEP, they collaborate with NOAA, that's the US and scientific agency, to enhance climate resilience and prepare for disasters. Now, through these partnerships, AI systems are used to track extreme weather events, like, what's happening right now with Hurricane Milton, right, if you're watching the news. So what's currently impacting parts of the US, right? NOAA uses real-time satellite imagery and AI-driven deep learning models to predict the hurricane's path. Now, what it does is it helps to anticipate storm surges, flooding, wind damage, and this obviously helps enable authorities to issue timely evacuation orders, which is what you're seeing on the news, right? So it showcases how AI protects lives and infrastructure in real time. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, Neil, is that ethical AI deployment is also a key consideration. Okay, so what AI systems ensure is that sensitive data that we're collecting, such as real-time imagery and social media inputs, and I'll talk about that a bit later, are normalized to protect the privacy of the affected populations, right? And this is by embedding these standards, ethical standards, I should say, where AI works to safeguard lives without compromising individual rights. And now, lastly, on this one, since you brought it up, my two sons, Leonardo and Louis, I just traveled to the Far East just last month, and we saw how the UN collaborates with agencies in Singapore and Japan, like the Japan Meteorological Society, the Japan Meteorological Agency, where AI-driven seismic systems predict earthquakes with what's now like 90% accuracy. Okay. Now, what's interesting about that is that these early warnings allow authorities to take not just critical actions, but doing things like shutting down nuclear power plants and halting those high-speed trains, before the disaster strike. So by integrating AI with early warning systems, Japan has now been able to protect both lives and critical infrastructure, showcasing how AI can be used both ethically and effectively in these sort of high-stake situations. Does that answer your question, Neil?
Absolutely does. And I'd like to sort of extend a little bit further on that. You're talking about the value of these partnerships. Yeah, the role of the UN, I guess there is the privileged position of being able to bring different partners together in a way that maybe other organizations wouldn't be able to. Does that open doors, help progress this area?
They come with their own challenges, Neil, right? Because with any large organization, talking to any small or other large organization, right, those relationships are sometimes very difficult to build. So I wouldn't agree potentially because you are representing a famous organization, things are easier. And things are dynamic, right? So even if you do build a good partnership, that partnership may change in time. So it's a kind of a yes or no answer. And I think anybody who's involved in these sort of partnerships, Neil, it's hard work on both sides to not just maintain them, to make sure those plans are executed accordingly.
Absolutely. A double-edged sword there somewhat. Let's move on to another key area here, the role of AI playing in conflict zones. Obviously, never more topical than things are at the moment. We don't want to get into granular detail of that. Of course, it's not the time and place to do that. But how do we use AI from a UN point of view when it comes to conflict zones? What kind of benefits are there?
Yes, Neil. Yes. This is definitely a challenge again, though. Conflict zones are incredibly tough environments. So I've been into these areas, right? But AI is proving to be a game changer. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, you may know it as, they use AI to analyze satellite imagery again, but this is to detect damage to critical infrastructures such as hospitals and power grids. And AI models like convolutional neural networks, which you've all heard about, they break down these images pixel by pixel, right, using semantic segmentation to pinpoint where aid is needed the most, right? Now, just in July this year, I was in Geneva for the AI for Good Summit. And later that week, I saw how the UN is integrating AI into these humanitarian efforts. For example, in Ukraine, right, AI has been crucial in analyzing satellite images after airstrikes, helping organizations prioritize aid for that damaged infrastructure. So after airstrikes, and this is going back to the partnership that they were asking me, so after airstrikes on power grids earlier this year, the AI systems used Maxar technology and UNOSAT, which together as a partnership allowed humanitarian groups to quickly identify where services were needed to be restored, ensuring help reached the most critical areas first. And then again, just in August, during my visit to India, I took my little sons with me. I'll tell you more about them in a minute. I saw how the Border Security Forces, that's the BSF, and the Indian Army are deploying AI-powered drones. Now, these aren't your traditional drones that you can buy off Amazon, but these very sophisticated AI-powered drones with thermal imaging and computer vision to monitor sensitive border regions, right? And these AI systems, alongside anomaly detection algorithms, they detect suspicious activity, allowing security forces to respond swiftly and efficiently into that area. The other 2 points I wanted to raise, actually, based on that. I'm coming through okay. Am I there first, Neil?
Oh, loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Yeah. Okay. Israel and Palestine, right? I have to talk about that. So also in Israel and Palestine, similar AI drones, but they were using transform models. I heard someone speaking about them a little earlier. Now, what these transformer models, they do, they analyze social media in real time to predict where violence might flare up. It sounds a bit Big Brother, but it's actually AI for good. Now, what it does is it allows organizations like the International Red Cross to preemptively send medical teams and resources to these at-risk areas, right? And AI also uses NLP, you've heard of natural language processing, to also analyze live news reports on social media to detect those escalating tensions. So finally, Neil, on this question, it's crucial we make sure AI aligns with human conditions and ethics, right? So things like data anomaly and differential privacy, it protects individuals while ensuring AI-driven insights, right, are deployed ethically. So the goal is always to uphold human rights, right, while helping civilians in conflict zones all the time. So I hope that sheds some light on this, Neil.
Absolutely does, and it's absolutely fascinating that the level of, as you say, granular detail that's going to. How has that technology, from your perspective, improved and developed? Because I'm sure these are tools, these are solutions that simply weren't available a few years ago. It must have made an astonishing difference in those particular areas.
It's not so much the tools weren't available, Neil, it was the cost of the tools not just the cost of procuring them, but running them, and also the kind of people, when it comes to knowledge transfer, that was more of a challenge for operations point of view. That has become cheaper to operate these models. They have become more sophisticated, and we are getting more people who are trained on how to be able to use these systems. So absolutely. So it's a hockey stick, mainly around the cost elements of it.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move on to the digital divide, about how AI can help bridge that in maybe more under-resourced regions, whilst addressing issues like equity, infrastructure, privacy. From what you see, how can it help bridge that divide?
Yes, the digital divide. It's, again, one of the biggest challenges, right? The International Telecommunication Union, that's part of the UN, the ITU. It's a specialized agency of the United Nations. It plays a key role in expanding access to information and communication technologies globally. Okay. Now, the ITU works to help undeserved areas, and these are areas that are sort of very difficult to reach, okay? To try to gain affordability, as I was saying earlier, and reliability on internet access, right? So this happens by collaborating with local governments and leveraging AI, I suppose, again. They've made a fantastic development on infrastructure development, smarter and more cost-effective, right? So you may ask how, right? So let me give you an example of Sub-Sahara, right? So well, according to, and I wasn't there on this one, but according to a case study I read by the ITU in the Sub-Saharan Africa, these AI-driven solutions have cut broadband deployment costs by up to 50%. So, right down in half, right? By optimizing where and how infrastructure is deployed, which actually has significantly expanded, coverage in rural areas. I was also in Toronto, so Sub-Saharan Toronto in Canada in March this year as well. And one of the key areas of focus in Canada, for its under-resourced regions, believe me, Canada is, I believe, the second largest country in the world, is leveraging AI to bridge the digital divide and support small businesses, right? So, people always think it's about rural areas in the middle of nowhere, but it could also, in third world countries, but it also can be rural areas in, what we don't consider a third world country, right? So Canada is committed to 2 billion Canadian dollars. That's about 1.46 billion US dollars to its AI Compute Access Fund to enhance computing infrastructure for AI-driven businesses to tackle that, digital divide. And then Neil, in August again this year, I went to visit India again. I think it was only a couple of weeks apart, and I saw firsthand how AI is being used to expand internet access in rural areas through digital. I think it's called the Digital India Initiative, right? So the AI-driven solutions here, they optimize infrastructure placement similarly, but making broadband deployment again more cost-effective. But they use reinforcement learning models to simulate various deployment scenarios, right? So sort of going and digging things up and knocking things down and laying cable, you can simulate that whole environment, okay? And that's similar to the disaster bit we talked about earlier. You have computer models that simulate the environment, so you can actually see in layman terms what would happen and how things would work out. So in simple English, this means what this means, so we were to determine the most cost-effective plans for laying down fiber cables and communication towers, right? That would be, crucial. But the last bit on the ethical piece, right? Privacy, again, people's houses, people's address, people, what they do. That also remains crucial. So the ITU uses federated learning. So what that does is ensures that local data is processed on site and never centralized, right? So it preserves that privacy while improving access to technology. So ultimately, Neil, right, AI bridges that digital divide by ensuring that everyone, no matter where they live, can participate in the digital economy while protecting their privacy, okay? And this is ongoing.
And it's absolutely the A can often stand for augmentation. It's just making smarter and better decisions quicker, which is incredibly exciting. I am conscious of time. It is running away from us very, very quickly. And one area we've not touched on yet is environmental conservation, which I'm sure is a huge pillar of your role and what you do. For you, how can AI be supporting environmental conservation? Huge subject at the moment. What role does that play?
That is actually one of my favorite topics, Neil. And AI in the environment is already doing incredible work in environmental conservation, right? So, for example, deforestation. In the Amazon, that's the rainforest, not the online book reseller, okay? UNESCO is using computer vision systems to analyze satellite imagery, again, using deep learning models that apply what's called a convolutional layer to extract key features like edges and textures, distinguishing trees from cleared land. Then there's something called pooling layers. Now, these streamline these features, making the model more efficient without losing those critical details. And then the fully connected layers, they classify areas as legal or illegal logging. So combined with transfer learning and data from multiple sources, this approach delivers precise and I would say effective deforestation detection. Now that can distinguish legal logging from illegal activities with 90% accuracy. And that's a major win for protecting our rainforest. But, AI goes far beyond just detection. We're also using AI to predict future environmental risks. So you've heard of IoT, right? So these Internet of Things networks with environmental sensors, they gather data on wildlife movements, the forest health. They help us understand and forecast, pretty much all these, potential threats. So in Costa Rica, which I visited with my wife in April, the United Nations Development Programme, that's the UNDP, supports these indigenous communities, particularly in the Brunca region, which is somewhere down there in Costa Rica, right? By using AI to monitor reforestation, efforts. Now, these efforts are vital for protecting the biodiversity, and 12% of the conserved areas, Neil, are located in these indigenous territories, right, where AI tools help ensure sustainable land, management. So finally, through federated learning, sensitive local data stays within those communities. These ensure that ethical standards are met while allowing AI to support conservation efforts without compromising any of that privacy or the autonomy for those who live there. So it's a perfect example of how AI can protect ecosystems while respecting the rights and knowledge of those groups, whether it is in the Amazon or in Costa Rica. I hope that all makes sense, Neil.
Absolutely. As I say, we are running out of time quickly. We do have some audience questions. I have a couple more I want to get through quickly. Final one from me really is, we are talking about the big issues here: conflict zones, environment, natural disasters, huge things. Maintaining ethics and ethical use of AI has to underpin all of that. How much effort goes into that? How much consideration from yourself goes into all of that, of making sure that there's that strong ethical foundation to all the work that's going on?
So who asked that question?
That's coming from me. That one.
Oh, it's coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that is a great question, right? And it really is down to we lead with that. I lead with that. I mean, if you look at what the pillars of the UN are and what the SDG goals are, right? We focus on obviously a better world, a better planet, a better way of life for the people. And ethics, of course, are always forefront. The UN makes sure that the AI solutions are fair, transparent, and accountable. So AI has to serve humanity. That means ensuring that communities, not just corporations, right? So communities, so listen here, drive its development and deployment. Now, AI needs to be human-centered. It needs to be designed to meet real-world needs without sacrificing privacy or autonomy, right? And we go back on, I just want to touch on the partnership bit as well, right? So partnerships aren't just about technology itself. They're about building local capacity, making sure that vulnerable regions have the skills, the infrastructure, and the tools, right, to manage and sustain their own AI systems. So in many parts of Africa, for instance, we're training local developers, setting up innovation hubs and working with governments to build AI that they control. So it's all about giving people the power to create their own future, right? The right people, right, to do that. So sum it up. I mean, here's what I've learned, right? Global partnerships are more than just bridging that digital divide. They're about empowering regions to take control of their future, our children, the people who are going to be in this world after we've gone. So AI, is used to improve healthcare. We've seen that earlier today, education, something I've been heavily involved in, and obviously the infrastructure. AI is just a tool, right? It's up to the people, the developers, the governments, the communities, who truly make a difference. And in my experience, that's where the real magic happens, Neil.
And we have one quick question from the audience from someone who calls themselves KLP. I'm not sure how much depth you'll be able to go in on this, but I'll put the question to you anyway. We've obviously been talking about AI for good. This flips the question somewhat, and it's how can the UN ensure that unscrupulous countries or organisations don't develop AI for bad? If so, how? If not, how problematic is this?
Well, it is hugely problematic, right? And it is happening, right? We can't turn a blind eye to it. As an organization, it goes down to exactly what I said a minute ago, right? It's us as a community of a network of community to make sure that we report, analyze, and understand that these things don't go too far. And in many instances, they are, right? And it's you, whoever asked the question, KLP, right? It's you as well to observe what's happening around you and start reporting to the regulators and authorities anything that may sound suspicious or out of the ordinary, so that the relevant authorities in the relevant regions or jurisdictions, right, can stop it from happening. Ourselves internally and the organizations and partnerships, we have strict policies on this as well. So, everything goes through an audit trail, everything is scrutinized, and nothing's ever released if it feels it's actually not doing any good to humanity. So I hope that answers your question, ALP.
I think it does. Well, Aaron, I could talk to you all afternoon, but the producers would not be best impressed with that. You've got a fascinating role, some incredible work going on. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Really enjoyed your company.
Thank you, Neil. Pleasure to be here. Thank you all.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.